It's Wednesday, October 7, 2015. After the closing bell here, upboptionmillionaires.com. Look at S&P 500 futures, another boomerang type trading session. We saw that from the lows. Last Monday, we had a big collapse, but since then, all the dips have been getting bought, and seemingly each day we get this dip that looks like the market's ready to fall to pieces, and then we reverse course. And we reverse course overnight. A lot of moves into the opening bell the next morning as we get these overnight ramps. You can see these ramps. And then we get these reversals, the big jobs report reversal, and then massive vertical spike to the upside. We've continued to pile on gains here for the S&P 500. Today looked no different than the rest. We started to pull back. It looked vulnerable to downside, the market did, and then boom, we find a bottom, reverse course, and that downside just never happened, folks. It just didn't exist. As we close at session highs, you look from a longer term perspective here, after this pullback that we saw in August, the ultimate crash to the lows, I think this is a bear flag, and I think it's going to break down to the downside. But of course, that'll get negated here. We're right up against long-term trend line resistance here. If we can break over 2,000 and above, we have the Fed minutes tomorrow. Maybe they'll push them out a little early to get the fire burning before the usual late afternoon ramp. Something to keep an eye on. And also, if you look at S&P 500, to me, looks like it's topping up this nice left shoulder head, right shoulder forming here of this wonderful bear flag that's going to break down. One thing to watch, though, one thing to note, and I've seen this correlation, other media outlets talking about going back to 2011, the bottom we had after the debt downgrade. It lasted, actually, this formation lasted, I believe, from August to October before we really started to gain some momentum to the upside. Of course, prices were some 50% lower then than they are now, but something to keep an eye on. A similar pattern. I know like people like to use historical trends and patterns to figure out where the future of the market will be, and here we are, similar type pattern. So that's something to keep an eye on. I remain bearish, not just the charts, but also economic data. We have a bank writing down $6 billion after the bell coming out with that. But of course, that's something, I guess, not deflationary in this market. Central banks are just going to print the night away. Let's look at Amazon. This is actually a chart that's pretty bullish. Pull back from its highs. So if you want something to go long in this market, I think Amazon probably going to break out the record highs before its next earnings report. Google as well, earnings, I believe, next week. Wonderful pattern shaping up here. Reversed an over 1% decline on the session. Apple, this is something that looks bearish to me. And you can see it's lagging the marketplace here. Wonderful pattern. We had the lows back in May of 2013. Great buy. Nobody wanted to buy it here. Seemingly, everyone's upgrading it here. Reminds me a lot like BlackBerry. Remember, that was $120, $130 stock. Actually, before it even hit 120, 130, you're upgrading it to 160, 170, and you see where it ended up. Not saying that's the case here, but the analysts have a habit of getting a little overzealous, and you can see this pattern here. Looks really nice to me for a move to the downside. Traded under 110 today, could not hold it, and I think once we hold 110, that might be the last we see of it for quite a while for Apple. All right, UPB here, optionmillionaires.com. Also look at the bond market. I'll bring up the TLT 20-year Treasury ETF at key support resistance levels here, looking for a break to the upside. XLE Energy is on the mend. Look at this candle we had. Today was up over 2% before pulling back, but this is the weekly candle. Starting to reverse course. Is something sustainable? I don't think so. I think it's another one of those dead cat bounces. We'll see. Speaking of dead cat, look at the dead cat bounce we had in Caterpillar. Traded actually lower today before recovering those losses, but again, the trend is down. Caterpillar is something I've looked at some puts. Home Depot reporting earnings in a couple weeks. You can see the trend remains up. I see a similar chart pattern with Disney before it reported earnings, and look what happened there. I think that's what's going to happen with Home Depot heading into earnings, so that's something to look for. In the next couple weeks, Disney still hasn't recovered that gap down that it had post-earnings. UPBOptionMillionaires.com. I'll see you in the chat room. Everyone have a great evening. Let's take one last look at S&P 500 futures. Up over 1% today on the trading day, and now it's up near the highs of the session. You can see this wonderful cup and handle formation that we had intraday. S&P 500 futures levels to watch heading into tomorrow will be this level we're at right now. If we break above it, especially in the overnight session, very bullish overnight these days. Seemingly everybody wants to buy the S&P 500 futures overnight. We'll see if that trend continues. This will negate some pretty nasty bearish perspective. All right, UPB, take care.